Hello, everybody. Welcome to our very first new play conversation. I'm Michael Walkup. I'm the artistic director of Page 73. I really appreciate you all joining us this afternoon, or if you're watching us later on YouTube, thanks for checking this out. I want to take care of a little housekeeping right up front because we're here in this Zoom webinar world. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties during this conversation, you can send an email to info@page73.org and someone will try to get right back to you. Also, if you see a fly land on my beard and I don't notice, don't leave me hanging. You can also send word to info@page73.org and someone will try to get word to me. So we're gathered today for the culmination of an 11-day process that we've undertaken with playwright Peter Gil-Sheridan, director Margot Bordelon, and an incredible cast: Maechi Aharanwa, David Anzuelo, Sasha Diamond, Wyatt Fenner, Annie Golden, Joél Pérez, and Connie Shulman. Over the past nearly 2 weeks, Peter and his team have been diving in on the script of his new play, This Space Between Us. We're able to keep working in depth with our writers like this, even during the theater shutdown, because our community of donors has really been sticking with us, and I want to start by just saying how grateful we are for that. You can learn about all of our upcoming new play conversations this fall, and also you could decide to make a donation yourself, all on our website, page73.org. So for our new play conversation today, we're going to meet Peter and Margot and hear a bit about their process. Then we'll welcome the actors who are going to read excerpts from 3 different scenes from the play. And finally, we'll use our remaining time to open it up to you for questions. So let me explain now how that will work. At the bottom of your screen, you'll find a button marked Q&A. When you click that, you'll open a chat box in which you can type a question for the panel. You can do that at any time during this conversation. The panelists and the cast will see the questions, but your fellow attendees won't see what you write. We'll be welcoming our associate producer, Kari Ullman, to moderate the Q&A, and she'll be asking as many of those questions that you type in as possible during our remaining time. Now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome playwright Peter Gil-Sheridan and director Margot Bordelon. Hi.
Hi.
Let me do a little bios here. I got to know Peter initially through our 2013 Interstate 73 Writers Group. Peter's plays, which include the Rafa Play, Cockfight, Ritu Comes Home, many others, they've been supported at theaters such as the Guthrie, Interact, Cherry Lane Mentors Project, Playpen, Soho Rev's Writer Director Lab, and I know the list goes on. He also recently joined the drama department faculty at Vassar College. Margot Bordelon is a new play director through and through and has directed new plays all over New York and around the country. Playwrights Horizons, At the Vineyard, The Atlantic, Roundabout, Actors Theater of Louisville, Denver Center Theater, Yale Rep. Also, that list goes on. And I believe our first time working with you, Margot, was collaborating with another Interstate 73 Writers Group member, Kate Atwell, on a reading back when we did those things in person. Thank you so much. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
All right. So we'll chat for a little bit before we welcome the actors on to read excerpts from your play, Peter. So why don't we start with you? Could you tell us a bit about this play, This Space Between Us, and how you initially came to write it?
Sure. I decided to go for a darker look, to make it feel like we're in a darkened theater. I wrote this play, the first draft of this play a couple years ago, and I wrote it because I was feeling incredibly frustrated with a lot of people in my family and in my social circle. I was feeling frustrated with my very conservative family members, and I was also feeling really frustrated with my really, really liberal friends. So I ended up wanting to make a play about that, but I didn't want to write a play about Trump necessarily. So I decided that this was a better way of kind of exploring some of the things that I was frustrated about.
We were showing the plot description a bit before, but would you mind, in your own words, trying to give us a quick go through, since we're only going to dip into 3 scenes ultimately?
Sure. Basically, the play is about Jamie. He's at the center of the play. He has a lovely boyfriend named Ted. And at the top of the play, we learn that Jamie has been offered a job in Africa. He's a very successful lawyer, a corporate lawyer, but he's longing for something more. He's longing for meaning and depth in his life. And so basically the play takes us through his announcement that he is thinking about taking this job, all the way through to his arrival in Africa. And no one wants him to go. They all think he's crazy, and he is a little bit. But he also makes some good points along the way about what we owe to the world. I think he's in the play with his mother and his father, who are based on an aunt and uncle of mine who are very conservative. I don't know if they're here today. We'll see. And his aunt, who is a nun, who is based on no one I know, because I don't know any nuns. And then he's got two best friends in the play who are based on some friends of mine, a compilation of a bunch of friends of mine. So
we won't make you name names there.
No, I won't name them.
Margot, you met Peter a few years back, but then this has been your first real chance to work together on a development process, I know. So can you give us a sense briefly, because we're all here in this format of Zoom, what was rehearsing on Zoom? What was working together on a new play process like for you guys?
Well, working with Peter is dreamy. We met, I think almost 7 years ago when we were both doing plays out at Playpen. But this process, I've been sort of skeptical of Zoom things. I won't lie. But I've been really pleased actually with how this process has gone. Despite the literal space between us, as we've been saying, I think that we were really blessed with a room of folks who were very open and generous. And I hope Peter feels like it's been highly productive. I feel like he's been doing some awesome rewrites over the course of this. So, of course, rehearsing in an actual room would have been preferable. Like we would have had paper we could be writing notes on. And, one of the things that's tough about Zoom, especially when working on a comedy, is like trying to get the comic rhythms when there's Zoom's deadly delay. So I think in the room we would have had a stronger sense of where comedy was working. But overall, I've actually been really heartened by the process, and I'm just super grateful for the brilliant minds and big hearts of our awesome cast.
I was going to say the three of us, when we get together, are much funnier too. Just everyone should sort of dial
Absolutely.
up. Totally. But Peter, given Zoom, given this offer, we called you and said, hey, you'll go first. This will be our new way to work with playwrights this fall. Were you nervous in any way? And then did anything surprise you about what it was like working in this format?
I wasn't nervous at all. I was thrilled. I was so excited because in my mind I thought there's not going to be any theater for a while, and there's not going to be any of my plays for a while, and so I was really excited to get to be in the room, especially with Margot and this cast, and I, like Margot, found the process to be not as bad as I thought it would be in terms of just some of the technical issues that we might have, or some of the issues around comedy, which I think we worked through, and actually we laughed quite a lot throughout the process, which was really nice. For me, it's been one of the most productive developmental processes I've ever had. I was really able to break up the play in a way that I haven't been able to do sometimes in other developmental processes, I think because of the smart acting and directing and dramaturging. And in a way, weirdly, because I wasn't getting on the train and coming in and out of rehearsal every day, I was able to sort of kind of get into my own world a little bit when I wasn't in rehearsal, which also allowed for I think more productive rewriting. So that was the sort of silver lining of
it. I thought we might get into the crafting of the play a bit. Peter, on the first day of rehearsal, we usually sit around and we talk about where the play came from and all of that. You said something really interesting, which is that when you started writing this play, you set yourself certain rules, almost like a game, and it was going to help you generate a first draft. And one of the rules, there might have been a couple, but one of them involved pulling character names out of a hat to determine who would be in a scene. And I'm so tickled by this because the play is so entirely cohesive in the end, and yet knowing there was this element of randomness all along, I'm curious to hear about that. And then also, so you got into this process, we had these great actors. Did you stick to your rules? Did you change? How did you adapt?
Yeah, so I was in a situation where I knew that I wanted to write about a certain thing, but I didn't know how to get started. And so often I'll do this. I'll play some sort of game to write the first draft. Because I don't do so well at like plotting out plays. I kind of have to get into them to know them. Right? I'm not a good like plotter. So I did do this thing where I knew that I wanted to have a scene with 6 people, 5 people, 4 people, 3 people, 2 people, and 1 person. And so I drew their names out after creating them, and I had to put those people in each scene. And I knew that I didn't want all of them to ever be all on stage at once. That was sort of what I knew at the outset. And then the only time I cheated was that the last scene of the play was supposed to go to Frank, the father character in the play, and I decided to give it to Luann, who is the main character's best friend, because I felt like she didn't have her moment yet in the play, and I felt like I didn't really want, it used to be the final scene of the play, it's not anymore, but I didn't want for the father in the play to have the final word in the piece either. So I did cheat on that. I held on to that structure for such a long time because, I can hold on tight to something. And eventually I had to sort of let go of the initial game that I was playing so that I could tell the best story possible. And that meant subverting a lot of the rules that I created for myself. I added another scene on the end of the play. I added a character into a scene. So it was a really great runway, but it was, once I really got heavily into the rewriting process, I think I really needed to sort of say, those rules are now outdated and unnecessary. They're random in some ways. And I think the play feels a lot less random now that I have let the random game go. Does that make sense?
We talked about that idea of scaffolding sometimes, and then you take it off and the building stands. And I think your building is standing now. I just want to remind everyone watching live that you can use the Q&A button down below to ask questions that we'll get to later on with our associate producer, dramaturg, Kari Ullman. But why don't we move into the scene? That caught me by surprise that we were ending there. Okay. Margot, would you join us again? And then it is now, thank you for that, actor. Sorry, I really got discombobulated there. But I am going to welcome our cast to pop back on because we're going to do Q&As now. And I'd like to welcome Page 73's associate producer, Kari Ullman. Kari joined Peter, Margot, and the cast for the entire process as dramaturg. And today she's been collecting your questions and is going to lead us through them now. So thanks for joining us back, everyone. And Kari, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, thank you, Michael. So you can all continue to type in questions for Peter, Margot, Michael, and the cast, and we'll get to as many as we possibly can before we have to wrap up. So to kick things off, the first question we have is, during the introduction, Margot, you mentioned the play and its title has taken on a certain special resonance in these unusual times. Peter, or any of you, could you speak to how your understanding of the themes of the play might have changed or shifted since this pandemic?
Do you want me to take that? Should I take it? I'll take it. That's a good one. Totally. I mean, I wrote the play 2 years ago prior to the pandemic, but also, pre-George Floyd, right? The world has really changed a lot. I mean, I know that we've always had a lot of trouble in the world always, and it's not new, but this particular moment where it's all coming together at the same time, it feels different, and it has definitely affected the play. I think we're all in a place where we're really asking ourselves, what are we going to do? I keep thinking to myself, am I going to have to quit my great new job and go down the street with, bricks and a pipe and in order to save the country? Is that where we are? Is that what we're doing? So this question of what our responsibility is to the larger world, and also what our responsibility is to the people who are right next to us, the people who need us for security, the people who need us for love and attention. How do we balance those things? How do we find a way to do both? I don't know if it's possible, but I think that's one of the questions the play is bringing up. And I think that the play, in a funny way, I thought, oh God, I have to get this play done before the Trump administration ends, because, and I actually think that it's a better time now than it's ever been, because we're all feeling that tension.
All right. And how has this play changed over the past week and a half? What has the feedback loop been like with all of these amazing people in the room? And anyone can speak to that, Peter, Margot, and we'd also love to hear from the actors too about how their characters and character arcs might have changed too.
Well, I'll just say what I saw, and I told Peter this yesterday, I think, that he's written a group of flawed human beings, and that as the workshop sort of went on, I noticed how it felt like they had more dimensions to them, and nobody was just all the bad guy. Nobody was all like the nun, that she's all this. They all say things that are like, and then they redeem themselves by saying something that's actually very telling and very moving. And so they felt like full human beings. And I thought as the weeks went on of working on it, that they became fuller. I guess I would say that.
And Joél, would you like to speak to how your character in particular has changed? I know we've gone through some of the biggest evolutions with Jamie over the past week and a half.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Peter it's been such a wonderful week and a half working on this play, and I feel so, we joked that it was kind of like Quaker meetings, like we would read a scene and then just kind of talk about our response, our actions and feelings about the play, which I really appreciated. It's such a rare opportunity as an actor to feel like your feedback is appreciated, and you're not just like, here are the lines, here's the scene, read it like a robot. It's kind of nice to feel like there's Peter really appreciated our input. Jamie is such I think over time, maybe like the first draft of Jamie was a bit more sarcastic or just like unlikable. I'm always like unlikable. I think that's people have reasons for being who they are. I don't think we have to necessarily make people likable or unlikable. But I think you catch more bees with honey. And so I think this guy being a bit more sweet and charming and coming from a place of being really torn about having a life that's pretty privileged and successful, and feeling like he's not doing enough. I definitely can feel that as myself. And I think especially now in this moment in time, we're all kind of like, how can I be contributing more? What can I be doing? We all feel so isolated. And so, and how that can sometimes be a bit of an ego trip. Like, who are you really doing that for? And I think Jamie kind of learns that perhaps this romantic idea of going to Africa and helping people is harder than he really thought it was going to be. And it's so heartbreaking in that final scene when the idea that he thought Africa was going to be was hard, and he's maybe not as strong as he thought he was. And so it's been really nice to feel that evolution, and also just the evolution of all the relationships have really deepened over the last week and a half.
Hey, thank you. And now we're getting a bunch of questions about how we've evolved and adapted to rehearse in Zoom in a virtual world. So Margot, do you want to kick us off by speaking to what sort of methods you've utilized in order to get us all rehearsing here on Zoom?
Sure. I mean, I think that this was such a script-focused development piece, right? Like the beauty of actually just presenting these 3 scenes at the end of this week and a half is that we didn't have to spend all this time kind of rehearsing for a presentation, right? Like we were able to spend the majority of our time really focused on the script, talking about the characters, talking about structure, and the way that we did. I mean, Peter was also just pretty tremendous in what he took on rewrites wise. Like he really was hyper productive. So we would read scenes and then he would go away and he would, do a sort of 24-hour turnaround, and we would read the new material and discuss. And that process pretty much continued on, up until yesterday, where he brought in yet another whole new draft. So it was really great to hear so much of what we had discussed and talked about, incorporated in that. Does that answer enough? I mean, it was really script focused and discussion oriented.
I was going to say another adaptation we made is we tried to rehearse really short days, just 2, 3, maybe 4 hours.
Yeah.
And personally, I thought even 4 hours sometimes were like long days. And I think just acknowledging that our fatigue level when we're all just staring at screens and not exactly getting that real. I mean, we're getting a lot of energy from each other, thank goodness. And this was an incredibly generous group of people. But at the end of the day, it's saying that when we set up the structure, we wanted to keep things sort of like drop in for a couple hours, and that's why we spread it out over so many more days than a workshop like this might typically be.
Now, I don't know what it was like for everybody else, but for me, all of COVID time has been an interesting. Like, my husband isn't a performer at all, and he's not in theater at all, and so it's been a strange glimpse. He's had a real glimpse into what is normally very compartmentalized in my life. That I'd be in a rehearsal room being insane, and then I'd have to be like. So now it's weird to be like, okay, from 10 to 1, can you just shut up and can you stay in the bedroom, and can you make the coffee quick because I gotta, it's so weird, but then also super convenient because I can just like roll out of bed and turn on Zoom and I'm at rehearsal. So it's weird, but cool.
Yeah.
But weird.
And go on, David.
Oh, thank you. What I experienced here, I'm not sure if it was Zoom or if it was the people involved or a combination of it all, but I felt it was one of the most successful workshops of a play I've ever experienced. And I feel a lot of it was really the atmosphere that Margot created and the openness and quickness that Peter had, and that everyone in the cast was like in it. And I'm not sure if it's because we're on Zoom and so all we have is our words, but everybody's like, their brains were turning, their words, they were making really excellent points, and things just like moved faster than I usually see in a workshop. So I think that's something of a benefit. Maybe people are getting the hang of it, but it was a really, in my opinion, really successful workshop.
Thanks, David. Wait, I want to hijack for a second and ask a flip of that question to you, Peter. Do you think that you rewrote differently because of Zoom? Like, do you think you're going to have to go into this play a year from now and de-Zoom anything about it? Is it talking? I mean, you have a lot of physical comedy in your work in general, and that is in there. We didn't happen to read a lot of those stage directions, but that question sort of came into it. I'm curious what you thought about your rewrites and the Zoom.
I mean, I think I was just saying this to my students the other day, which is that when you have a scene that's stuck, you've got to just set it in motion, get them moving around the stage. And so I often, can unlock things by making the scene more physical. And one example was a nun caught under a hospital bed, which is a new scene that happened this week, or a new part of the scene that happened this week. So for me, I write that way. I have such a specific image in my mind of what's happening that I think if nothing, I mean, actually Zoom kind of highlighted when they were talking too much, and it was like, oh, they're still droning on. I'm not hearing the stage direction. They're not doing it. What are they doing? So it in a way, I don't know. I think it was good that way. So, yeah.
Peter, a bunch of folks are curious about what it's like writing in a semi-memoir mode when you're basing characters on members of your family, if that comes with any anxieties and how you've grappled with your obligations to your parents, to your family members during the writing process.
I mean, I think every single play of mine is like that. I don't think I've written one, I don't, I don't think I really often create characters completely from scratch. And I would argue that probably most playwrights don't, that there's somehow a composite of people they've encountered or they've known in their lives. One way is that no character, I say that these characters are based on my aunt and uncle who are very conservative, but in fact, they're somewhat like them and they're somewhat like my parents. And there's a lot of stuff that isn't actually true or real. And so the difference here is that I'm not writing memoir and I can make their characters do whatever. And sometimes their characters are a lot nicer than they are in real life. And sometimes it's the opposite. I love this thing. I think it's Anne Lamott who says, if people don't want you to write about them, then they should have treated you better. And I love that. I'm like, my writing is the space where I can express what I'm struggling with in the world, and hopefully other people will see themselves in that. And so, that's unfortunately for my family, that's just what they've got to deal with. And otherwise I'm very nice, just maybe not always in my work.
Should we do one more question, but then we will wrap it up after this next one? Is that okay, Kari? I know we're right at our hour mark.
Yeah, that's great. Just want to toss one more out there to the actors about sort of what is your regimen like as an actor during these unnatural COVID times? How do you structure your life, your schedule when we're in rehearsal, but we're not coming into rehearsal and all of our sort of rituals, communal and otherwise, have been disrupted? So what is the life of a working actor like these days?
Reading books and missing this. But the last week and a half, we all got this. It was like an enormous breath of fresh air. But prior to getting to work on this, like reading and working on my imagination that way, just reading.
I live with 3 other actors. So at times it felt like we were at Ripley Greer here. Because everybody, when things started coming back, you know, slowly, like readings and workshops, and then you'd be like part of different sort of seasons that were happening on Zoom. And there was a day where everybody was in a room with like a ring light and a, you know, some like back screen. And I walked down the hall, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm completely in Midtown New York here. So, you know, definitely there were months where everybody was shell-shocked, and it's like, we all will never work again and this will never happen, you know. And you know, slowly inching forward, and Zoom did give us that outlet to make connections with people. And, you know, to sort of repeat what Michael said, the energy is really kind of, can be very flat in this venue, and so you miss what theater is about, and it's the contagious energy that we give to one another. And this is sort of, you know, it doesn't quite do it, but, you know, we're all doing the best we can. We're figuring out how to do it, but you know, it's so fun to make connections. That's why we all probably went into this profession to begin with.
I will say I had to be on set this weekend to film something, and it was such a strange world with all of the masks and the testing, and it was so stressful. And to be on Zoom in comparison was actually very relaxing and like very easy, which is, I had not thought of it that way before, because it does feel so fatiguing sometimes, but in comparison to like real world interactions right now, it is such a great tool.
And we can see each other's face. Do you know what I mean? You forget that if we were rehearsing someplace, until the camera's rolling, you're covered up. And it's sort of like a gift to do this and be able to see somebody's full face. So.
Well, I want to just end by thanking all of you, all of our actors, and Margot and Peter. I said at the beginning of this, or 2 weeks ago, whatever, that this was our first time doing something this long and intensive that would culminate in something public, and we couldn't have had a better group of people to do that with. So just sincere thanks. And I want to thank everyone who joined us today, and everyone who's going to be watching on YouTube, especially all of Page 73 supporters. We're just really glad to be sharing this type of work, showing a little bit of what we're trying to keep doing behind the scenes to support our writers in a time when we can't physically be together. So if you know someone who you think would appreciate this conversation, a link to the recording of this will be emailed to you. It's going to be available on our website, page73.org. It'll link to YouTube. The full video with the scenes in it will be available for 4 days, and then as per union regulation, the scenes will go, but the conversation will stay, so you can keep forwarding it after that. It's been so good to be with all of you. We're going to sign off now. I hope everyone stays safe. I hope everyone's well, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks very much.